Evening. Welcome to House Groups. We are still in Luke chapter 9. There's a story where 9 of Jesus's disciples are left down at the bottom of the mountain. Because just before this, in the Transfiguration, where Jesus' clothes glow white, Moses and Elijah are there, Jesus has taken James, John, and Peter up on top of the mountain. So the 9 disciples that are left on the bottom, they encounter this man whose son has been possessed, and they're trying to cast out the demon, and it's just not working. And so eventually the father takes the boy to Jesus once Jesus comes down from the mountain, and Jesus has no problem with the situation. However, Jesus' comments to the disciples and to the crowd, how they had little faith and how they were an unbelieving generation, are a bit puzzling to us. I mean, they seem almost a bit strong. And so I want us to dive into this tension. And how does the fact of how much faith they had, I mean, does that play into it? The fact that they prayed at all? Or there's a lot of just tension and theological difficulty in this passage. I think another way you could frame this is you could call it a mystery of faith. Now, mystery is a bit difficult for us in the West. Like in the West, we're prone to want to, kind of like a scientist, understand everything we can about God. But some things of faith are just going to be a mystery. Like if you could understand everything about how God works, well then guess what? You would be God. God works in a number of dimensions, for example, that we're just never going to understand. The average person can understand about 4 dimensions, right? Like you have length, width, height, and time. Some scientists say there are up to 10 dimensions, some say 11. And once I get much past 4, I just don't even really understand what they're saying. But how many dimensions does God operate in that we don't even understand? Like, I think about time even, the dimension of time. God is outside of time. Like, he existed before time began. And so, understanding how exactly God interacts with us in our prayers is a bit of a mystery. Like, let me give you an example or two. Okay, let's say you have a friend or a family member that has cancer, and you're praying that they get healed, or maybe you're praying for a friend to come to Christ. What do we know from Scripture about this interplay of how our prayers work and how God has planned things? Well, we just know a couple things from Scripture. How it all works together is quite difficult, but it is easy to look at what do we know from Scripture. So what do we know? We know that from Scripture, it seems like our prayers make a difference. When people pray, things happen. We're told to pray. Furthermore, it even seems like the fervency of our prayers seems to make a difference. Luke 18, for example, Jesus talks about the power of the persistent widow, how she kept badgering the judge, and he says in the same way, you should pray. Others talk about fasting as the strongest form of prayer, as if something more is happening. I mean, even from our story today, the disciples couldn't cast out the demon because they had little faith, Jesus says. And yet, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we also see from Scripture that God has a plan. And God is going to do what God is going to do. And sometimes, although this is usually the exception to the rule, sometimes people get healed or people get saved even when nobody was praying for them. God just did it. So how do you put all of that together theologically from the Bible? It's not easy, actually. And some people try and make it really easy, and I just don't think it is. But I think we can live in this tension, in this mystery, where we just do know some of the things are true. Like God is sovereign, and he has a plan, that our prayers and our dedication to them seem to make a difference. How that all aligns and works together, I'm not sure that we even need to have to know, or we're going to be able to know. But we can trust that we should pray, and that will make a difference, and that God is in control. And so I just want to encourage you, like, if your prayers really matter, then we got to pray like it really matters. We got to pray like God can. Amen.